Good afternoon, everyone. If you're joining us, go ahead and share this broadcast. Professor Darren Johnson, can you take over for me, please? But I'll
Of,
ask if you're joining us, everybody, please go ahead and share. I'll turn over to Professor Darren Johnson. Good
of course.
afternoon, Miss Fraser.
Good afternoon, Attorney Deani Winter-Funday. Good day, everyone, and welcome. Please share the program as you join. And we're asking you to just share because we have a really good panel lined up, and we really want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate.
Good morning, Miss Mitchell. Good morning, Miss Fraser. Good morning to everyone who
Let
is
me
joining
just
us.
try to share live on my page as well.
And I'll do the same as well. Good
Yes.
afternoon.
And for the other attorneys, please go ahead and share the live on your page.
I keep saying good morning, Darren.
Right?
It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. In the whole Caribbean spirit, we're going to give everybody about a minute or two to join us because we have a great discussion lined up. So go ahead. Good afternoon, Mo. Thank you for sharing. Good afternoon, Kathy, Ruben, Santiago. Everybody just share so we can have a great discussion this afternoon.
Awesome. All right, we're giving them one more minute, Deani.
One more minute. At 12:05 we will start.
Awesome. And I'm seeing some people joining on my live. Venice, Nikita, Shanna, go ahead and share the live. We want as much persons to join because this is going to be a really great panel.
So how are you doing, Professor?
I'm doing good.
That's good.
Hanging in there. Balancing parenting time with this session.
I love it.
But I'm making it happen.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being my co-host today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Miss Mavis Joseph, for sharing. You're such a loyal fan. Thank you for sharing. Good afternoon, Kim Mitchell. Miss Thomas says, good morning. I am sorry. Good afternoon.
And I see my mom, Elaine Brown Taylor, join. Janice, Grace Virtue, thank you so much. Just share the live. All right, it's now 12:05, so we're going to get going. So welcome to Immigration Live, and thank you so much for joining us. COVID-19 has dominated the minds of Americans over the past 6 months, and it is very easy to forget that one of the biggest issues dividing the public is the current administration's immigration policy, where undocumented immigrants were arrested by ICE and families were separated at the US-Mexican border. Now, it's not like those policies went away with the pandemic. In fact, they're even more restrictive today. So Immigration Nation is a Netflix 6-part docuseries that take a look at the current immigration policy from all sides. And it looks at the undocumented immigrants and their families that are affected by these tougher policies. It looks at the attorneys, right, who have sworn their careers to help them. It looks at the law enforcement officials that are tasked with carrying out these policies, whether they agree with them or not. All right. So just a little introduction. My name is Professor Darren Johnson. I teach business and management courses in the New York and tri-state area. And I also work as a human resources practitioner. And I'm honored to help direct this reaction by our esteemed panel this afternoon. So welcome to Immigration Nation. We want to hear your reaction. So we also have immigration law attorney Deani Winter-Funday, who is the ideator of this important discourse. Deani?
Thank you, Darren. And I think I just saw Swain walked by. I love it. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is attorney Deani Winter-Funday, and I was sitting at home when my daughter Danielle, who was born in Jamaica, she came to the United States when she was 4. She called me and she said, "Mommy, did you see Immigration Nation?" And I was like, "What's Immigration Nation?" And she said, "It's a Netflix docuseries about the deportation proceeding,
Mm-hmm.
about individuals at the border. Good afternoon, Kibby Joseph. Hope you're doing well. And she started to talk to me about this docu-series.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that came to my mind was, I wonder what my other colleagues are thinking. And so I just started texting madly to my other immigration colleagues. And I said, let's do a reaction to Immigration Nation. So that is what's happening here today. I am joined by 6 of my esteemed colleagues, and we're going to take this discussion into pieces. But you
Mm-hmm.
can see all these beautiful men and women on your screen. They're all immigration law practitioners. Um, Attorney Simone Archer is based in New York. Attorney Kevin Miller is licensed in Jamaica and here in the United States. He's
Mm-hmm.
a former prosecutor. He's going to lend his ears to us today. We also have Attorney Jamila Little. She's
Mm-hmm.
licensed on the island of Trinidad, and she's also licensed here in Florida. She does criminal law, she does immigration law, and she
Mm-hmm.
also does personal injury. She's going to lend her ear to us today. I have my good friend and colleague, Attorney Hardam Tripathi. He is big on immigration policies.
Mm-hmm.
What are the policies and why do we do that, right? He's going to lend his voice to this discussion. My good friend, Mia Moore, Attorney Martha E. Aristizabal. I love this woman like no other. She's going to lend the advice and experience. She's been working around immigration and immigration policies since 2005. That's how long she's been doing this. And so she's going to talk to us from the Hispanic perspective or the Latin perspective. What's going on at the US Mexican border? What's going on with that population? I have my friend, my sister, my love, Attorney Stacey Bradbury. She is of Jamaican parents. This bad girl was born in Brooklyn, New York, and now she's an immigration law practitioner of Bradbury Law Practice out of Orlando. So this is a panel that's coming to you today, and all we're going to do is to react to Immigration Nation. I think I included everyone. So there isn't much that was new in Immigration Nation as practitioners, right? The 6-part documentary series, if you haven't seen it, it is on Netflix. And it talks about removing individuals from the United States, whether they're being removed at the border or they're being removed from their place of residence hundreds, thousands of miles away from the border. So that's what this discussion is going to do. My audience, I want to hear your reaction to, even if you have not seen the movie, we can still, or excuse me, the docuseries, we can still kind of interact with our audience. The goal of today's program is to get this discussion going. It was a heavy discussion prior to Corona. We do not want this discussion to die because Corona happened. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Darren Johnson. We're going to get this discussion started. We will be looking at your questions in the chat, and we'll also be taking your calls. So thank you for my esteemed panel for joining us, and let's get started.
Of course. And thank you so much, Attorney Funde. Really great panel. So I'm just going to jump right in to Attorney Tripathi and Attorney Winter. Let's look at the policy changes that have occurred during this administration. The Trump administration, of course, have expanded ICE and changed its mandates. So now we have agents, and agents can deport anyone, including parents separated from their children, and also the deportation of non-criminal offenders. All right. So, Attorney Tripathi, if you may, what are some of those policy changes?
Right. So, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to all of our listeners today, and thank you for Diani and Professor Johnson for setting this up as well. Before we actually look at the baseline issue of, how have the policies changed and why is it a zero tolerance policy, we actually have to backtrack a little bit and kind of understand, where does ICE actually get their authority from to enforce the immigration laws of our great nation? And that would be the Immigration and Nationality Act. And when most people view this docuseries and they take a stance one way or the other, you kind of have to understand the policies that came prior to the current administration's policies. So for sake of time, I just want to kind of quickly discuss that George Bush's policies were in fact what started or was the catalyst to what ultimately ended up where we are now. So earlier on, back when George W. Bush was the president, there was a operation called Operation Streamline, which was basically responding to spikes along the Texas border. There was basically an influx of people coming across the southern border, and they were being criminally prosecuted based on George Bush's Operation Streamline policy and that administration's initiatives. And so they were prosecuting all migrants. That's where zero tolerance first started. Trump is basically just mirroring that. And basically what that zero tolerance policy was about was that those caught along the border, along those border states, were put into a criminal system and not in civil immigration courts. So there were minor exceptions for parents who were traveling with their children under the George W. Bush administration. And their whole goal was to end catch and release. So migrants were held basically during those deportation proceedings that were causing, it basically ended up causing the rise of what we now see as the private detention industrial complex. And that's something I'm sure we'll be discussing later on. Then we had Barack Obama come in, and that actually, he carried over what George W. Bush's policies were, if not made them even more stringent. In 2014, he basically declared that there was a crisis on the southern border with respect to a surge of unaccompanied minors from Central America. And you had seen this child migrant crisis, which then led to unprecedented and historical rates of criminal proceedings, deportations, and family separations that were not seen in U.S. history up until the Obama administration. After that time, families were held together in administrative, but not in criminal proceedings. And there were makeshift overflow facilities that were created, and children were put into makeshift fences and what a lot of people say are cages. And they were only given like thermal blankets to stay warm. And then President Trump's administration came in and just went even further. And they took it further by making makeshift tent cities, further, having more government contracts with the private detention industrial complex. They basically also enforced the letter of the law by executing some executive orders that were put into place that focused on three major points to include border security, interior enforcement, and in conjunction with the Pentagon, they actually had executive orders limiting the amount of refugees and visa holders that could come to our country. So that's just a little preface based on policy and where we are now compared to other past administrations. So I hope that gives you all a little bit of insights into how immigration policy has changed throughout the years through different presidential administrations.
Sure, it does. But in your opinion, what do you think prompted these changes?
I think there was definitely a sentiment among U.S. voters regarding the economy and jobs, which led to a situation where they were looking either very hard right or hard left based on what was going on in the country. So a lot of Americans at the time in the population, the electorate, had stated or had felt, or there were underlying sentiments that they were losing their jobs or that there were things happening in the economy, and to have the scapegoat. Some may say that it could be immigrants who are coming here and breaking the rule of law allegedly, and so they became the scapegoats, and that caused immigration is very politically driven as well, and politics and policy are sometimes often intertwined, and so as a result, based on the sort of sentiment along with rallying up a specific voter base, that may have been a catalyst to having more stringent policies that the Obama administration had already started implementing. So it's just based on how the articulation and the rhetoric was, along with the media and along with very large sentiment throughout the country.
Awesome. So, Attorney Tripathi, one word: is it fair or unfair?
I wouldn't say if it's fair or unfair. If you, for the viewers who have watched our documentary or docuseries, there was actually an episode 4 where from an ICE perspective, they're saying it's not about being fair, but about the enforcement of the rule of law in this nation. From the humanitarian side, from the immigration side, I wouldn't say it's fair either. I would say it's more about an equitable type of equitable, I think would be the word to use. At the end of the day, it's not the administration. Their role as Article 2 of the Constitution is to enforce the laws that are made by Congress, and the policies are ingrained in Congress, who the same populace votes for. So at the same time, I would say that it's all about equity. It's not about fairness. It is about enforcing the rule of law, but having a humanitarian and compassionate type of feel as you're implementing those laws. So to better address your question, I think what you're trying to say is, from an executive way, is it fair? I would say what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing, which is enforcing the rules of law of this nation. What I would say from your fair perspective is that Congress is the one who ultimately is in charge of writing those laws that the president then carries out. So all the laws that President George W. Bush, President Barack Obama, and President Donald J. Trump have implemented have came from the Immigration Nationality Act, as part of their function that they're supposed to carry out the rule of law in our country that Congress promulgates based on the people who vote for them. So at the end of the day, I think we need to take a deeper look at ourselves as individuals and U.S. citizens on where we want to go with the direction of this country, and the Congress who then implements those laws, and the executive who then executes on those laws. So it's not a really easy question to answer, but I would say it's not about fair or unfair. It's more about equitable and the rule of law.
Of course. Appreciate your thoughts on this piece here. I'll just turn it over to Diani to continue the discussion.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you. Thank you, Professor Johnson. I want to talk about, and I want to pick up a little bit on what Attorney Tripathi just mentioned. He talks about all the different administrations and their roles or the actions they have taken in being stricter on undocumented, on illegal immigrants, even to individuals who have presented themselves at our borders, right? The docuseries kind of talks about maintaining vigilance, right? And I think a lot of people are saying, under the current administration, they've never seen anything like it, right? They're seeing the children in the cages. They're seeing more people being detained. They're seeing individuals waiting in Mexico. Before we get to that part, I want to talk a little bit about our immigration court system. And I'm going to bring my friend, attorney Stacey Bradbury, in. And I want you to talk about the immigration court, Attorney Bradbury, where it sits. And I want you to walk us through a typical deportation proceeding. So I am sitting at home. I get an order that I'm ordered to immigration court. What does that look like? And for those that are just joining us, we're talking about immigration now and deportation from the United States. If you're just joining us, like and share. Attorney Bradbury, talk to us about a typical deportation proceeding and or immigration courts.
Okay, thank you, Dione, and thank you, guests who are watching. And hope you definitely gain something. You will definitely gain something from here. So a typical immigration proceeding, deportation proceeding, starts off with a notice to appear. So we will have the Department of Homeland Security prepare allegation charges against a respondent, which is the person who's in question now to be deported. And their allegations and charges are set up in this notice to appear. They are served it by it being handed to them or by it being mailed to them, but they are served personally with this notice, and they will now have to prepare to go to court. They have to go to their immigration court, whatever court is seated in that county area. For me, in my area of Osceola County, I go to the Orlando court. That's the immigration court that sits in my area. So once you go, you have to now address the charges that they are alleging against you. You have to determine, are these charges something that I can admit or deny? Now, this is similar to what happens in a criminal proceeding, but it's an arraignment. You're going to determine whether you plead guilty or not guilty. Well, in our case, we're not necessarily pleading guilty or not guilty, but we're saying we admit some of these charges or we do not admit. And then that's where our actual trial/hearings, individual hearings, will proceed from. Okay, we have the government. The government is sitting there ready to counter whatever it is that we present, or in some rare cases, agree with some of the information that we're presenting, and at some point we'll come together and either dismiss the charges or have the case terminated. But again, that's a rare chance that will happen. So what's happening here with us is we're in this court looking at a judge who's ready to now receive this information by way of application. We file them, we come back, and then we argue in front of the judge to hopefully win the case for our client. Now, the issue here is, people, and I want us to remember, right now we're dealing with an election year, a serious election year. And our president appoints the chief legal officer, which is Attorney General Barr, or in general, the Department of Justice head attorney general. And they are the ones who are actually, we're fighting against. We're fighting against the attorney general. And if they are not, I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible.
Don't, Attorney Bradbury, you can speak. I told you all when I called you that I have no restrictions. This is not a political conversation. So I want you all as attorneys to speak as freely as you choose to. We're not attacking any administration. I want you to answer the question based on what you're seeing on the ground.
Well, the policies that we're now dealing with, okay, makes it very hard now for us to do our job. And it makes it hard even for the government attorneys who may have compassionate feelings towards the situation of our clients. They may have these compassionate feelings, but at the end of the day, they have to do their job and they have to stick to what it is that the law says or the guidelines that they have to follow. Sometimes it's not even what the law says. They are using discretion. And if they are politically grounded, they will do it based on their conservative views and won't move an inch because there is discretion. Everyone has discretion. Even though they're saying they following the rule of law, they have discretion. So now we, the respondents' attorneys, are now trying to fight that, whatever that is. Whatever that is, again, it's whatever their political views is whatever quota they may have to meet, whatever that is, we are fighting that. And it's important for us to know those who are able and eligible to vote. Remember that these are people who we have to consider when we're picking our president. Are they going to pick someone who's going to be sensitive to the needs of the people, which includes people who have immigrant families, not just one group of people, the whole entire country, and balance that out fairly for all to benefit from? And so I'm bringing it back to the point of how is it at court? That's pretty much the general where we sit, we fight our case against the government and whatever law that our client is allegedly broken. Now, we'll say this. I find, however, that there are reliefs available that if argued properly, so you need to have a great immigration attorney. If it's argued properly, if they advocate zealously for you, you will see the benefit of you being able to stay and get your green card and move forward in this country and obtain the American dream. So it's not a loss when you end up in court. Sometimes I tell my clients it's a good thing because if we just went through the agency of USCIS, the chances of us getting any benefit is little to none. But if you go to court and you have your judge and you argue well, the judge can, again, with discretion, grant you the benefit that you have been seeking.
Thank you, Attorney Bradbury. I want to bring Attorney Archer in because I know you were talking about being in court, the government making its case. Attorney Archer, how or why would somebody be placed in deportation? I work a lot with the Caribbean community, and I think they get scared if they get a paper that says come to court, right? They're like, nope, I'm not going, or I don't want to fight this. Walk us through, Attorney Archer, how or why somebody would be placed in court. And then after you, I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Little to talk about what are some of the reliefs that individuals can ask for. Go ahead, Attorney Archer.
Okay. Individuals can be placed in deportations for many reasons. The major discussion in immigration nation is illegal immigrants. Basically, they came here without authorization from the government. So they didn't have authorizations from the government. So that alone, they shouldn't be here. So they can be placed in deportation because of that. Another important thing to understand, a lot of people are here and they have what is called a green card. They're lawful permanent residents. That means they went through the process. They went through the legal process. It could be based on business basis. It could be based on they had a family member who filed a petition for them. The petition was approved. The government approved it. They came here. They received what is called a green card. They're permanent residents. They're able to work. They're able to do that. But having a green card means the government is offering you a privilege to be here. Now, there's certain guidelines you have to follow. You have to follow the law. So you may have a green card, but you come here within the first 5 years, you commit a crime, may commit theft, may commit burglary. You may commit domestic violence. There are a lot of different crimes you may commit. And by committing those crimes, then you're not authorized to be here anymore. But the tricky part is you may be here, you commit those crimes. It depends on where you're located. You may get arrested for those crimes. When you're arrested for those crimes, they run your fingerprints, it comes up, then ICE may come in to detain you based on that. Or you may get arrested, ICE may not come in, but then you decide, you have your green card, you're able to travel freely, then you travel outside the country, then you're coming back into the country. Every time you leave this country with a green card and you're coming back in, you're not guaranteed to come back in. Every time you come to the border, whether it's the airport, whether you're crossing through Mexico, you're crossing through Canada, you're crossing by water, and you present yourself to immigration, you're asking them to allow you to enter. Sometimes you get to that stage, they run your record, they see that you may commit a burglary, you did a theft, you had some domestic violence case, you had some type of DUI, you had any of those incidents, then they said, oh, okay, so you're not authorized to be here anymore. And then that may put you in the removal proceeding. Now, most people, they come here, they may commit a crime, and then 10, 15, 20 years may pass and they think, oh, I'm good. That was a long time ago. But there is no statute of limitation when it comes to immigration. And another thing is you may commit these crimes and for state purposes, they're misdemeanor. But then on the federal law, they're more serious. So then whenever you get into any type of trouble, you have your green card, you make sure that if you have to retain a criminal attorney, that criminal attorney also understand immigration law, because sometimes you make these types of agreement like, okay, I'll take a plea bargain to something, and criminal wise it may not be much, but for immigration purpose it may be detrimental.
And I just want to point out to our audience, for those that are watching, attorneys Archer, Little, and Bradbury are what we call crimmigration lawyers. So in that, they do both the criminal side and the immigration side. And I want to emphasize what Attorney Archer just said. Even if you were arrested on something what you think is very simple, it is super important that you at least consult with an immigration lawyer, or make sure your criminal lawyer understands immigration law. Thank you, Attorney Archer. I'm going to grab Attorney Little and bring her into the conversation. She also does criminal law and immigration law as well. Attorney Little, I kind of want to talk to you about, okay, so I've gotten the order for deportation. Should I just pack my bags and go? What are some of the reliefs that are available to me, even if I snuck across the border, or if I entered lawfully, or if I have a green card? What can I do? What can I do in court, Attorney Little?
Yeah. So just to answer your question, before I start, definitely want to say thanks again for having this important discussion. Definitely, if you have received what is called an NTA, or a notice to appear in immigration court, which is a document that you receive once you're being placed into removal and the government is trying to basically send you back to your home country, you don't want to pack up and go, right? I would definitely echo the sentiments of many of the other attorneys who said the first thing that you need to do is really get a good immigration attorney. Unfortunately, I did not hear all of Attorney Archer's comments, but one of the big things that you have to remember is immigration is federal. Immigration is really by and far discretionary, and so a lot of the reliefs that we're going to talk about are actually discretionary. You have to prove your case. You have to fall into a certain category, and you have to be able to prove that you meet the requirements for whatever basis of relief you're seeking. So just really basically some of the reliefs that are available once you do find yourself in immigration court would be asylum. So we have seen systematically this attack on on asylum. You cross over the border, and it's really unfortunate because, asylum seekers and refugees are really one of the most vulnerable groups of immigrants, right? So you're basically here saying, well, I'm going to be killed or really hurt if I am sent back to my home country. And there have been just a lot, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit further as we go along, but there's been a lot of attacks on the asylum system. So in order for you to actually qualify for asylum, you would have to pass what is called a credible fear interview. Essentially, you would have to prove that you do have a credible fear of being sent back to your home country. From there on, you would continue to go through the court process. You'll have a first hearing and a second hearing. And again, I apologize if I'm repeating some of the things that were already said. I was unable to hear some of the prior comments. But asylum is certainly something that you can seek if you are a person who's afraid to go back to your home country. And again, it could be politically based. If you are seeking political asylum, or if you fall into certain categories based on race, religion, and there are several different categories that you can fall into to qualify for asylum. Another thing that I tell people to look at is, and we've actually seen this, it's interesting, if you are a US citizen, you cannot be deported. So another defense to deportation, believe it or not, it comes up sometime, is that, hey, I'm actually a US citizen, so whatever crime I committed, you probably have to flesh that out in state court, and I'm not deportable. And I think there have been some stories where we've seen US citizens who've been held in detention, and they have to go through the process of really proving that they are US citizens, but it's certainly a defense to deportation if you're a US citizen. And then we look at cancellation of removal. There's cancellation of removal if you are a green card holder, and also if you are a non-green card holder. Under asylum, let me just step back for a minute and talk about the Convention Against Torture. The United States is a party to several United Nations treaties. One of them happened to be the Convention Against Torture. Now, obviously, it falls under the group of asylum defenses. However, there are really higher requirements to qualify for CAT, or Convention Against Torture. But the United States has signed a treaty saying that they would not send anyone back to their home country if they're going to be tortured, and that's under the Convention Against Torture. So going back to cancellation of removal, if you are a green card holder, you can qualify for cancellation of removal. I'm not going to go into all of the the basis for which you would qualify for it, but just know it's out there. Again, a lot of these are discretionary. So the judge is going to look at, what are your ties to the United States? Do you have family here? What is the nature of the reason why you're being placed in removal? Is it a serious crime? Do you have an aggravated felony? And a lot of different discretionary points they would actually look at. Now, even if you are a non-green card holder, let's say you came on a visitor's visa and you've been here for a certain amount of time, you might actually qualify for cancellation of removal. And upon receiving cancellation of removal, you actually get your green card. So I believe it was Attorney Archer who had mentioned, some people think it's a death sentence when you're placed in immigration court, but actually that could be your best bet if you have a really good advocate who is able to fight for you, and they know what your relief would be based on your particular situation.
All right, Jamila, I think because you're in the hot seat, I have a question for you. And I have two questions. One is going to Jamila, one is going to go to Attorney Tripathi. And I'm going to ask the panel to keep their answers to about 60 seconds. All right. For Jamila, good day. Thank you for hosting. The viewer has seen the documentary episode 2. It showed the officer from Central America, and I do remember this, that he was seeking asylum, and in fact he was a verified officer who had worked with U.S. law enforcement on matters across borders, right? So he's from Central America. He was a productive member of the community, but he was deported based on the ICE officer 10-second decision. His family is left in the United States. Can you talk about the humanitarian impact officials have when ICE decision is on a whim. I don't know if this was on a whim, as I believe there was a prior removal order in place. Would his family have any recourse, Attorney Little?
Okay, and unfortunately, I don't know that I looked at this particular episode, but certainly, as I said before, ICE and USCIS and the immigration, judges, it's a discretionary based system, right? And ICE officials are given a lot of latitude to make these decisions. If you take a look at where the immigration courts sit and where the immigration system sits, it's under the Department of Justice, it's under DOJ. They report right up to the Attorney General, who reports right up to the President. So we see a lot of the decisions that are made really reflect the sentiments that come directly from the White House. As far as recourse specifically for someone who already has a prior order of removal, and they're trying to get back into the United States, it does depend on, like I said, what is their crimes, what is the basis of their removal. I cannot, like I said, I did not, unfortunately, I didn't see that segment, but I would not just blanket say this person cannot come back. They may have some recourse based on, just depends on what their crimes were and the reason why they were removed. Again, based on what the officers would have looked at, or maybe what they saw, if the person did have a prior order of removal and they were maybe checking in to OSOP and taking, they had like an order of removal and they were checking in, and at some point the ICE officer decided that they weren't going to be doing anything and they made that decision, I would say, definitely speak to an immigration attorney about getting that person back.
Thank you, Attorney Little. And that's exactly what happened. This individual had a prior removal order and he was checking in, and the ICE officer, through discretion, decided to hold him. Attorney Tripathi, is the quota fair? We talked about we watched in the film. Is the quota fair? We keep asking this fair or unfair questions because I think, quite frankly, immigration law is super emotional. So, Attorney Tripathi, in 30 seconds, is the quota fair, sir? And you need to unmute. Attorney Tripathi, you need to unmute.
Yes, good call. That would help.
Yes.
So to answer your question, from what we've seen in the docu-series is that quota was a big indicator of how the inner workings of these ICE agents and how they kind of did their job on a day-to-day basis. Just my thoughts on that, coming from a federal law enforcement perspective, having worked with the United States Attorney's Office and working with other agencies like the DEA and whatnot. I do see that not all of these brave men and women in uniform act like that. There were a lot of instances, however, in this docu-series where we did see them making inhumane and sometimes snide type of jokes that involves a very serious situation involving child separation, and the character and joking nature does not, I don't think, from what I've seen in my personal experiences, reflects how most ICE officers are, or how most agents are in law enforcement at the federal level. They are trained officers who have to go through FLETC and all these training centers and whatnot. So they are held to a higher standard, and that's why they do have that discretion. However, it is distressing to see in this docu-series having a phone call from an officer who's a superior requiring a quota system to have certain number of immigrants who may not have criminal backgrounds or just working day in and day out, which I'm sure we're going to go into. But I definitely do think there may be some training in that required. But quota of fear, it is something that I feel that this administration may be sometimes implementing to, basically have a sort of indicator that illegal immigration should be stopped and that immigrants should not come into this country. However, there should need to be another worldview that needs to come into place that puts the administration in the immigrant shoes, so they understand that why they're coming. And there's a lot of geopolitical and diplomatic type of situations at hand as well. So it's not a very easy answer. I see where ICE is coming from and where the immigrants come from, but to answer your question, there is indeed fear being distributed. And I believe this administration is using that as a way to curb illegal immigration in this nation.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a call? I think we have a call coming in. Caller, are you there? We might have missed that call. We'll get it again later. Attorney Little talked about the vulnerable attacks and the vulnerable population. Another vulnerable population we're going to talk about is veterans. And I'm going to turn it over to Professor Johnson to kind of dig into how veterans are being deported from the United States after they have served their country. Professor Johnson.
Of course. Thank you, Attorney Fundy. So just a little background. Over the past couple of years, there are a lot of stories of non-citizen veterans being deported, and those have made major headlines. As it turns out, there is a process in place that provides extra consideration for those immigration cases, but federal officials haven't really been following it. And so in the docuseries, I remember Cesar, he was a United States military veteran in that served in the veterans in the Marines rather, I'm sorry. And he was deported due to a drug offense. Then he re-entered and tried to get politicians to ease his undocumented status as a deported military veteran. And this was with no success. So I'm going to be throwing out the questions to attorneys Miller and Aristisabal. Let's talk about, Attorney Miller, I know you're not only an immigration lawyer, but you're also a veteran. So explain a little to myself and to our viewers what systems or mechanisms are in place, if any, to help our veterans who are not American citizens and are in
All right, so
removal
before we go
proceedings.
to what is it that is in place for our veterans, first we need to understand how is it that serving members, as also members who have been honorably discharged from the military, can be naturalized and become citizens. So there are two specific INA 328 and INA 329 that speaks to the process of naturalizing service members. Now, INA 328 has to do with if a member had served 1 year during peacetime, then he or she may be eligible to become naturalized under INA 328 once they qualify. So there, the general requirements for a normal citizen is somewhat relaxed when it comes on to military applicants, even though they still have to meet certain requirements. And also INA 329, which speaks to members who are, so green card holders who are a part of the military, who are serving during hostile times. And hostile times, as we know it now, would be from September 2001 up until now. And I'm happy you threw that question to me because I am one of them who have benefited from the 329 process, having been a serving member of the Army itself. So that process is there to assist members who are green card holders to become naturalized. Now, what we have to understand in terms of what is it that's in place to assist these service members who have been deported or who are on the verge of being deported, we have to understand that once you're not a United States citizen, it exposes you to removal if you get convicted or if you're arrested and charged for certain crimes. Now, the big question is how much of these service members or how much of these veterans have or had taken advantage of the opportunity to become naturalized through the military? Because the requirements for serving members and veterans is one of the main things that you're honorably discharged. So while we understand the emotions behind this person has served, this great nation so well, but yet still he or she is deported, I think, to be fair, the first question we need to ask is whether or not this individual knew of or took the opportunity at the time out to capitalize on, the naturalization process that the military offers. So that's the first thing that we need to understand. In terms of bringing them back to this country to stop them, as what was mentioned earlier, is that everything in immigration is discretionary when it comes on to, you having fall short, or if you fell short of the requirements in terms of being a good upstanding citizen, so to speak, if you get caught in any wrongdoings. So as any other citizen, then you know that ICE is going to be coming after you because you now make yourself vulnerable. So it is difficult to put a military person in a category to say he or she is going to be untouchable because they are part of the military. No, what we are saying is that if you get caught in that situation, what ICE has done is that because military veterans and serving members, most of them would have been exposed to certain information or certain things in regards to national security. So for ICE to just take them and make a 10-second decision to ship them back to whatever country they were born is not what the policy is or it should be. When it comes down to military veterans and serving members, then decisions like those must be elevated to higher level officers who will do somewhat of a debriefing, so to speak, to look into this person's military career and see if this person was ever exposed to top secret information or information that may be detrimental to this nation. So from
And
that
Attorney Miller, I'm going to cut you off because in watching the docu series, this was not being done.
No.
So would that change your response when we see that these individuals were being taken? Of course, they went through the process, but they might have committed some kind of crime. This was not being done. So would that change your response?
Well,
Right.
so, and I will go back to what Attorney Little said in her discourse earlier, and I would refer to a case law, which is a matter of Ming Shi, I think Zhu is how it's pronounced, where the Second Circuit basically said said to these courts that, look, when you make a hasty 10-second decision to remove someone from this country, we run the risk of condemning an individual to persecution, because look at the officer that was mentioned that was seeking asylum. He was checked out as being a genuine person who has cooperated with the United States in more ways than one in terms of law enforcement exchanging information. But as you see, a 10-second decision was made. So what I'm saying is that no, it's not. Generally, it's not fair in terms of how these guys have given their lives, have seen, their party, being killed on the battlefield. They themselves have been injured. They themselves come back with all kind of different mental and physical illness and injuries. So yes, there should be some kind of quote unquote a little bit more special treatment in trying to see whether or not these men and women in uniform who have served and are serving, whether or not we should give them some kind of leeway. Because look at it, if a member is going to be deported or because he or she got convicted of a DUI, there must be some kind of discretionary measures that can be put in place. We're not talking about serious crimes like murder, or we're not talking about serious crimes like those. Look at Caesar. Caesar in the docu series, this man cried for some kind of relief. And if we look at the governor when she was running, her main ticket was, look, I cannot stand to see my military people being treated a certain kind of way. But yet still, when Caesar went there, she had no time to see him. So it all boils down to the political arena. What is it that these people are really, what their missions really are? So I believe that military people now serving and veterans should have a little bit of leeway and should at least be treated a little bit differently. Yes, I do believe that. But I had was to go into so people, viewers and our listeners can understand that
Right.
there is a process in the military where these serving and persons who have served for a year and more in active duty can be naturalized through the military process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Attorney Miller. Very well said. Let's redirect the same question to Attorney Aristizabal. In your experience, you've been practicing law for quite some time. What's the treatment like for veterans?
Well, thank you for having me. And my opinion is my personal opinion is the example of Caesar is the clear example that shows how the immigration system is this black box in which the government wants to put and fit in everybody, all the immigrants, not considering whether they're veterans, whether they were hardworking abiding citizens, meaning they were paying taxes, they were leaders in the community. So the example of Caesar, the fact that he committed a mistake, I think it was for marijuana, something that nowadays is legal in many of the states in the United States. Carry on such a drastic measures of deporting him back to Mexico. I want to point out the fact that even when he went through the entire criminal case of marijuana, he didn't know that that crime was gonna have repercussion in his immigration status. He had to exit the country and just find out about his condition when he tried to re-entry. And that's when somebody told him, hey, remember that mistake that you made who knows how long ago? Well, now you have to then again go into the system, into the immigration system, and what is at stake is your livelihood. I have plenty of colleagues that are not familiar with the immigration system, and they keep comparing it to the criminal system in the United States or the federal bankruptcy system in the United States because it's federal law. And the reality is that the immigration system in America is supposedly a civil proceedings, or no, it doesn't have the criminal connotation until you walk in and you realize that what is at stake is your livelihood, is your freedom. But then again, even though the stakes are so high, there is no attorney appointed to your case. It is your responsibility to get an interpreter in order to communicate the way that is supposed to happen during your asylum proceedings or cancellation or removal proceeding. It is your burden to translate every evidence that you're going to present to immigration officials if you're filing for asylum. So all the burden falls on the person, most of them unable to pay for that type of representation, something that nobody has to worry about if you are charged with criminal offense that involves detention or involves your freedom, as it is. So back to the Caesar situation. I was in shock. That was my initial reaction. I couldn't believe that it wasn't meaningless, but something so little for possession of marijuana could trigger deportation for an officer that, served our country. And what was most shocking is how difficult it was for him to actually get somebody to pay attention to him, to his struggle. He had to cross the border illegally, drive, I think 8 times he had to go from Nevada to New Mexico to speak to somebody, and everybody was ignoring him pretty much. And it's because the unfairness that I see in the system is that it is one executive branch, the one that is issuing the rules or the laws, is the same branch that is trying to execute the rules, and it's the same branch that is actually enforcing and interpreting the same rules. So there is no balance of powers like you usually see it in the criminal system or any other system in the United States. And that's what the unfairness of this case, especially for veterans that have sacrificed so much, comes to life. Nobody's, at least I don't deny that the immigration system should be implemented. What I'm pointing out is how the lack of comprehension that should be in the system. Since Bush and then Obama and then Trump, they are all trying to implement a system that is broken. And what is being demanded is a comprehensive reform. And it's because people like Caesar that come from a different background, that are veterans, that have served their country, that have made a mistake, possibly made a mistake because of PTSD or depression or everything that the veterans have suffered after they served the country, and ended up in a deportation charge or in deportation proceedings. Is that lack of humanitarian touch that this American immigration system has that is being pointed out, and that we are crying to the government, to the president, to everybody that can hear that it needs to be changed, it needs to be reformed.
Okay. I think we have time to put one question in there on the issue of the loss or lack of humanitarian touch. Mo Franklin is asking, and he says this may be a stretch, but I would like to ask the panelists, since ICE is the apolitical federal organization, should ICE be abolished?
Attorney Bradbury.
That's a setup.
Listen, I just want an honest opinion on this one, so I know I'm going to throw it to my girl, Attorney Bradbury.
Wow. Okay, so listening to Martha, I want to add on something, but I'm going to answer this question first. My issue, I have a huge issue with ICE. ICE goes unchecked, in my opinion. ICE can order someone to be deported. I've not had the experience to see that order be challenged in appellate court. Like it cannot move up the ladder in any way, like the case went through an immigration court. And then when you go through immigration court, you have the chance to appeal, and you can appeal if you have the money, of course, to go through that, because that's a very costly process. So that right there goes to my issue with anytime ICE is involved, because ICE takes away the person's opportunity to fight.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean ICE takes away the opportunity to fight?
So, okay, I'm gonna start with something very simple based on two cases that I've had. There's this thing or process called expedited removal. And expedited removal is something that ICE determines if they catch you at the border and they feel as though you should not have been here, you're removed. Okay, you are considered deported, not in proceedings. You're no longer supposed to be here. Now that's one thing. But what I've seen happen is that they don't actually deport you at that time. They will still allow you to come into the country, and they still allow you to work because you can get a work permit. And that work permit you get, sometimes you are turning around and paying taxes into the system. But yet still, your options are few, pretty much none, because ultimately you still can be deported. When they wake up that morning and say, you know what, that guy that we gave that expedited removal to and that work permit to, even if it's 2 years later, 3 years later, after they may have decided to meet with someone and start a relationship, maybe even have a child and trying to develop a relationship with their child, they can still come back and say, hey, you got to go. And this is not, the court is not involved. The court is not involved. So this is what I mean by that option is not actually provided to you. Now, if you're already in the court system, then and they're involved, they just got to wait it out. They got to hear what the judge say. They got to see what the courts are doing. But if it's left to them and their discretion, there's no chance. And I find that, to me, that's inhumane. And I want to be clear, because I know politically there's a lot of people who would say, oh, you got these gangs coming over and you got these people causing criminal acts. No sane individual American wants these people in our country causing havoc in our lives. We're not talking about them. If we can get them gone and you've shown that they approve that these guys are worthless and not an asset to our country, get them out of here. But ICE is on a mission and given the permission by the Department of Justice and our president. Any president, whether it be Trump or Obama or Bush or whomsoever, they are given that authority. But these guys at least give you the other administration, I'm sorry, not the Trump administration, the ones before, they have some level of compassion when administering these objectives. When Obama put out priorities, he was deporting everyone. Everyone is deportable if you came in illegally. But when you say, hey, but we're going to have priorities, the worst ones, the criminals, the one that's caused harm to our nation, we're going to get rid of you first. That's more humane. I like that idea.
Thank you, Attorney Bradbury. All right. So guests, I really love this discussion. Love it, love it, love it. However, I am going to start chopping you off if your responses are going too long.
Right.
You know what? It's hard to keep a bunch of attorneys in check. I don't know how judges do it because I'm not succeeding. Attorney Tripathi, you have 45 seconds, sir. Attorney Miller, 45 seconds, and then we're gonna cut it so we can move on. So we can get a good reaction to the docuseries. So I'm asking everybody, keep your responses short, guys. I know we're long-winded because we're attorneys. Attorney Tripathi, 45 seconds. Attorney Miller, 45 seconds. Go ahead, sir.
All right, well, thank you. Attorney Bradbury brought up some great points. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to rebut kind of what Attorney Bradbury had stated. I understand that it is a emotional and a very, kind of a very sensitive situation. But at the same time, we have to look at how our government is formed, how our government runs, and we do have the administrative agencies in place that represent the executive branch. And so this isn't more of an issue as to what's inhumane or what's not fair, but I would rather argue it's more about the bureaucracy of how much our administrative agencies have gone and quote unquote unchecked. But there are congressional hearings on a day-to-day basis that the Department of Homeland Security, both in the Senate and the House, that they have to report to. There are certain protocols and procedures in place. This is kind of how our government does work. From a government standpoint, Congress does keep these agencies in check. How much they keep in check with and what all is being done to follow up on that is a whole nother discussion for another day. But I think this goes into more of not whether or not if it's inhumane or humane, because we all know kind of where we stand on that, but rather how can we look at administrative agencies in theory through federal administrative law being that fourth arm of government. So with the limited amount of time, I want to keep it at that, but there's something to consider as food for thought. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Attorney Miller.
All right. So just to piggyback on that, my issue is not with ICE, the organization itself. My issue is whether or not there are due process that should be observed when you actually hold people across the border and you detain these guys. Are we holding them as criminals? Are we holding them as simple detainees? People just want to come into this country for a better life. So ICE, to me, there needs to be more checks and balances. So this branch is operating as if, it runs itself, it reports to itself. It has no, that they're operating as untouchable. That's my issue. My issue is how can we get these guys in check so that we ensure that these people who are crossing the borders are treated fairly, are treated with respect. So once we understand the emotional aspect of it, to get rid of ICE itself would not be a solution, because what we'll do now is open the floodgates for other issues. So what we need to do is to find creative ways as to how can we, as practitioners, challenge the way in which ICE operates when they hold these guys at the border, or when they detain people who are here illegally. How do they operate? That's my issue. My issue is not ICE in general. It's how can we get them to operate in a certain spectrum.
Thank you, Attorney Miller. Two questions I'm going to ask Attorney Aristizabal to answer. The first one, if you're joining us, guys, this is a bunch of immigration attorneys. We're talking about Immigration Nation, the Netflix docuseries. I encourage you, if you have not yet watched it, to do so. That we're reacting to some of the issues that we see in the docuseries, but just so happens to be our day-to-day. Martin Brink, I agree with you. He says the treatment given to people detained at family detention centers would violate Geneva Convention protocols if they were prisoners of wars. Attorney Aristizabal, two questions for you, ma'am. First one, collateral damage. We've seen where ICE picks up, they take a search warrant, they're going for person A, person B is walking out, heading to work, they are taken into they're taken by ICE. Can they apply for asylum? What about if you came here on a visitor's visa, counselor? Can you apply for asylum? So can you answer those for me, and then we'll move on to the next section. Thank you.
It is a good point that you're bringing up. Yes. Nowadays, if immigration officials are doing what they call the raids, and they have a warrant that they're going to execute, and there happen to be other people, more people, or other undocumented people in the place or apartment or home where they're executing the warrant, then they have no reason not to detain the person, whoever that might be, a neighbor, the wife, the son, whoever it is. If it's not, it's common practice of immigration just to ask, who are you and where are you from, and are you documented or not? If the person answers no, I'm not documented, then you can assume that they are going to arrest that person. Can they apply for asylum? It really depends of many aspects. It really depends of there is a lawful allegations that the person has a fear to return to their home countries. But I want to point out something very crucial. At this point, it is not whether there is a relief, it's how accessible is that relief for these people. We're talking about family members, entire families that grab their kids, grab a backpack, two sets of clothes and they left their home. They have nothing. If they have something, probably the passport, and that's taken away once they cross the border. So the question, yes, there's a relief. Possibly there is a relief. If they pack everything and left because they're persecuted, because they're fear of dying, that is a good chance that they can apply for asylum. But how successful are they going to be if they have no recourses to retain an attorney, a good attorney that can, make a good case out of their situation? People need to understand that when you're thinking of immigration system, it's not like you're being charged with a felony where you get an attorney appointed to your case. These people have to borrow money from family members or neighbors or in order to retain a private attorney, because the government doesn't appoint anybody to your case. It's either a private attorney or a nonprofit that has attorneys to their service. And these nonprofits are saturated with the amount of asylum people that are, trying to request the asylum. So it's not whether the relief exists. The relief is there. It's how accessible can somebody get that relief or properly file for that relief.
Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney Marta. I think there's a caller on the line. Caller, you there? No. Hello. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Welcome. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, thank you for taking the call. Someone was re-entering the country, and I think you may have touched on it earlier, but about past transgressions coming up and the immigration officer telling that individual that they should have it sorted out, right? And so they went about doing it and decided to get their citizenship and went in and failed the test. What advice do you give for someone like that?
And I'll throw that to either any of you attorneys.
Let's throw it to Attorney Little. What advice, Attorney Little?
Yeah. So if someone is at the point where they are, I feel like we have to throw out blanket disclaimers as attorneys that this is not, legal advice, etc. But just generally speaking, if someone is at the point where they're able to go in and take the citizenship test, right, means that they would have already qualified to be an LPR, a local permanent resident. They would have met the statutory time frame that they have to be an LPR for. And if they simply fail the citizenship test, do it again. Go in, study this time, make sure you study, and do it again. If there's some other underlying reason why the citizenship application was denied, now that's a separate question. That's a different question.
Right.
But it is that this person just didn't take the time to study the civics and history of the United States. Get that CD, get that book, maybe even hire an attorney who can go into the interview with you and just reapply.
Okay, awesome. I hope that answers your question, caller. I'm just going to jump to Attorney Little. Watching the docuseries, asylum seeker Berta, she has been held by ICE for 17 months. In an attempt to discourage others. And so as asylum laws get stricter, asylees face greater hardships. I know the August 25th new rule that's coming up that will affect asylum seekers as well. So there are many proponents of United States immigration law that insist there is a right way, and the right way is to wait your turn. So let us look at some data. And I did some research, and I looked at the judge-by-judge asylum decisions in immigration courts for years 2014 through 2019. And we would have saw that asylum seekers or asylees are now facing stricter rules because of the deterrence.
Absolutely.
And we can see that the denial rates from the judges throughout the United States, it's close to 90%. So let's talk a little about your experience in the courtroom. What are your thoughts or ideas around the facts of this data? And what are some of your impressions? How do you recommend an asylee navigating this system?
Professor Johnson, that is such a great question. And I think these statistics are the statistics. You can't make that up. It is what it is. And they're provided so that you can see how judges rule. I think we had a discussion earlier where we were talking about the quotas. I think someone also mentioned the quotas that judges have, right? In 2018, judges were given pretty much a death sentence, immigration judges, and you would hope that judges could be impartial and use their discretion to help asylum seekers. But when you're looking at giving judges a caseload of 700 a year, 700 cases that you have to complete a year, and then you have to make sure that 15% of your decisions are not overturned on appeal, I think very quickly the judges will align their decisions with the whatever's coming from the top, right? So let's talk a little bit about asylum and what has the changes that we've seen in asylum. I mentioned earlier that asylum seekers are some of the most vulnerable people because they're trying to save their lives basically, and they're looking for somewhere, and they come to the United States where traditionally they said, send me your poor, send me your oppressed, we'll take them. And we've seen that these doors are being closed.
Right.
There's several laws and rules that have come down to make asylum that much more difficult. We saw, and I'll just go back a little bit. We saw the wait in Mexico, right? We saw the migrant protocol program where you're now telling people who are afraid for their life, no, don't come to this country. Wait where they're trying to kill you. You sit and wait there. We'll put up these court tents where you go in a tent. It's literally a tent, and you see the judge via video. These things exist. And then we look at Berta's situation where she was the grandmother who came with her granddaughter and separated by the border, so that her granddaughter now lives with the mother.
Right.
Berta is being held in detention, right? And the interesting thing about this is, the detention centers, and I think some of the officers even agreed, because the purpose of the detention centers really were not to hold people indefinitely. However, now the way the laws are, if you are an asylum seeker, you now can't get a bond, so you can't be bonded out. Until, the decision is made for your case. You can't be free, basically. So you're here basically indefinitely. And we know about the backlog because we know now that they're giving judges these quotas. And so it's basically a sentence, right? So asylum seekers, they now have a sentence. They're there in detention centers indefinitely. I think with Berta and many other people that face family separation, asylum is just going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. The recent rule you mentioned that goes into place on the 25th changes the rules dramatically for asylum, especially where it concerns getting a work permit. So traditionally, there was a wait period for your work permit. Once you filed your asylum applications, it was 150 days. Now we're seeing this waiting period increase to 365 days. If you miss the deadline, because traditionally with asylum seekers, you have 1 year to file your case unless there's some really drastic situation that you can prove happened and you weren't able to file your case. You have a year to file your case. Now with this new rule, if you do not file your case within that 1 year, you don't get that work permit. You don't get that card. And there's several other things that they have changed with this law for certain criminal convictions. Again, you don't get the card. So unless you can prove that there was delay, that was not your fault, again, you don't get the card. And you think about the time that it takes for your asylum case to really come before the court, and then you're able to work. I just think it really, really puts these people who are fleeing for their life in a difficult decision.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Attorney Little. And I mean, I'm not an attorney. I'm in education. I'm in academia. But Attorney Archer, the system is broken. And so, I mean, people are not interested in waiting for their case to be heard. Have these stricter immigration policies contributed to the lives of, or to the loss of the lives in the desert?
Yes, it has. The wait in Mexico, we see that there's a lot of issues with that. A lot of people, they're waited in Mexico, but they're not from Mexico, right? So you have people coming from all over waiting in Mexico. They don't know what to do. You have a lot of crime happening. Criminals are coming over and, abusing these already fragile members of society. With the new rules in regards to the asylum, where the individuals can't get their work permit, think about that. You're in asylum, you need to retain an attorney, you need to pay an attorney, you need to provide food for your family. You're unable to do that. So it's just making it more difficult. It's sad. It's very sad.
Indeed. Diani?
All right, guys. What's next? So this docuseries, I highly, highly, highly recommend that everybody watches it. When I said 90 minutes for 7 attorneys and 1 professor, I knew I was crazy saying that, because I was like, I think we can get through this in 90 minutes. Clearly, you see the immigration system is broken. I love the comments. They're talking about the heat index in Texas, 100 degrees in the summer. Imagine being held in a detention center and it's 100 degrees outside. This is not whether the administration has stricter policies or not. This is about human life.
Right.
I am going to turn it over to each panel member. And my question to you, and all I ask is each panel member, you have 60 seconds, right? 45 to 60 seconds. Let me see if the audience wants to see us again. Audience, if you want us to continue this discussion, just type in the box and say, continue this discussion at another time. I want to see the level of interest that we have in having discussions like these. As attorneys, we don't just want to sit back and do nothing.
Right.
This was aimed at educating. This was aimed at shedding light to something that is going on around us. All right. So I am going to turn it over to each panel member. I'll start with Attorney Tripathi, then we'll go to Attorney Archer, then Attorney Miller, Attorney Bradbury, Attorney Aristizabal, and Attorney Little. What's next? What's next?
Where do we go from here?
Attorney Tripathi, you want to unmute?
Right. So where do we go from here? This is a great discussion in terms of kind of what the next steps are for not only us as attorneys, but as activists who are listening in, who may be interested in kind of figuring out where do we go from here, what happens. And so ultimately, the best thing that I would recommend, what I've also really has worked for me, is always be in contact with your congressional members. They're the ones who always end really taking these issues, and they're the ones with the political will to go about doing that. If there are any causes for concern or anything of that nature that you think that you can create that systemic change, which you can, I would always recommend reaching out to them. Really doing kind of what that veteran did, and hopefully, getting better results than he did. But as a group of professionals who can go together and knock on that congressperson's door to say, look, these are the issues going on in my specific community. A lot of this, we may look at it as a national issue, but it's actually a local issue, in my opinion, because these are our neighbors. These are our members of our community we see day in and day out. These may be people that work with you or your family. These may be people that, maybe someone that you go to church with, or you go to your place of worship with, and these are people that all have a specific background and experience that ultimately adds to not only our quality of living, but to theirs as well. So at the end of the day, I look at it as a local issue. I look at it as something that can be national, but start by knocking on that door. That's the next best thing you can do. And also just stay abreast of all the different issues that are going on, and don't always drink the Kool-Aid. Don't always listen to what's going on always on the news or what people may be saying. Do your own research. Be active, not passive, in kind of your efforts is what I would recommend. So that's where we go from here as a community and as a populace. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Tripathi.
Attorney
Attorney
Archer?
Archer?
Where do we go from here? I would say if you're in this country, you have your green card, you're able to apply for your citizenship, apply for your citizenship. Apply for your citizenship so that you're able to vote, so that you're able to participate in the process. When these election comes up, you're able to vote. If you're illegal, you're not able to vote. But if you have your green card, you're an immigrant and you know the experience of those who didn't have their paper, you know, the struggle to get here. These are your family members, your friends, your colleagues. So if you're able to get your citizenship so you can be part of the solution.
Thank you, Attorney Archer. Attorney Miller?
Where do we go from here? First, our first stop is November. That's the first place we need to go from here, November. If we need policy changes, then we have to act. Number two is that for my military vets and serving members, capitalize on the programs which can get you naturalized a bit quicker. Do that, because we have seen and we're still seeing that there are no mercies for us whether or not we have served. So capitalize on that. Another issue is that for people who are here who are seeking asylum, who are having immigration issues, be careful in terms of going out there and hiring every single soul who say they're an attorney. Make sure you find an immigration attorney who understands your issue, who understands the process, who understands ICE, who understands the immigration system, the courts, whatever it may be. Remember, immigration is not criminal. Criminal is not immigration. They're two different spectrum. So a good criminal defense attorney doesn't mean that he or she's a good immigration attorney. So that, we're not giving advice, as we say, but a word to the wise is, seek out a good immigration attorney. And again, our first stop is going to be in November.
Thank you, Attorney Miller. And I agree with Colleen Bridgman. She said, this documentary scared me, really. We need extreme policy change in terms of immigration. Kirby Smith, if you are eligible, he says, apply now. The cost will increase come October 2nd, 2020. That is true. The cost of naturalization applications are going up. Attorney Little, where do we go from here?
Okay, so where do we go from here? I certainly would echo the sentiments that everyone has said before. I'll say this real quick. I don't think of myself as a very emotional person, but I cried when I looked at some of these episodes, especially when I saw the one with the person who died trying to come to this country. So to my immigrants, to people who are here and you are an immigrant, you have a green card, I would just say get your citizenship. I have been saying this since maybe 2015, become a citizen. If you can better your immigration status, better your immigration status. To my citizens and to people who say, get in line, do it the right way, I would say we're all human beings, get educated. So that that the things that people face, that immigrants face. We're all human beings. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We want the same things. We want to be with our families. We want better lives. And so that would be my ending points for today.
Thank you, Attorney Little. I see Kathy St. Paul. She says Canada's immigration system is federal entity and falls under the IRPA. Does the U.S. immigration system fall or create stuff? I don't understand your question. Does anybody understand it? I'll turn it over to who hasn't spoken it, Attorney Bradbury and then Attorney Aristizabal. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? I'm going to copy the sentiments of most of my colleagues here. We got to vote. And in order for you to vote, you have to be a citizen. So get your citizenship. We have people who are sitting around here for years and with their green cards and are not citizens. I didn't understand why. I know it's money. Sometimes it's money. Point of the matter is we need you to be citizens. Second of all, for us as attorneys, we need to do more outreach. Such as this, getting involved, getting on programs, being able to educate the community, because that's really what's lacking. Education. People are listening to so many different people who don't have the skill or knowledge or education. So let's do our part by getting out there and teaching, outreaching to
Thank
those
you,
who need the
Attorney
help.
Bradbury and Kathy St. Paul. They're echoing our sentiments to us. Everyone who is illegal in the United States should be regulated. Those with green cards should get their citizenship. Attorney Aristizabal, where do we go from here?
Well, I think, and as I stated before, we need a comprehensive immigration reform. It is a system that is being dramatically changed by daily executive orders. It's a system that is broken, that is not functioning the way that it's supposed to be functioning. So no matter who stays in power, if it's Republican, if it's Democrat, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we have an immigration issue in the country that needs to be addressed, and there needs to be cooperation from both sides. As long as we keep talking to the left, and to the right, there's never going to be common ground for us to truly point out what the problem really is and what the solution should be. And yeah, that's what I think. Those who can become US citizens, you need to do it. This is the time where your vote truly matters. And no matter who stays in power, the demand for a reform must stay on top of the priorities, must remain a hot subject, because a lot of people think that it doesn't affect them, but in reality, it does. When your neighbor is being deported, when your workers are being deported, when your daycare teachers are being deported, it's going to come to your ground. It's going to come and affect you personally. So yes, total comprehensive reform.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'll turn over to my co-host. My co-host, where do we go from here, sir? Professor Darren Johnson.
Of course. Thank you, Attorney. And I want to end by sharing my personal story. I was in removal proceedings. I did not commit a crime, and I was not detained. However, once I got the notice to appear, I did so before an immigration judge, and later on, I retained a lawyer. And I have to use this opportunity to really say a special thanks to my attorney, Shannon Leguer-Mingrad over at Spars and Bernstein. I was actively involved in the process. Every step of the way, I was emailing her to find out what is next, etc. And this helped really to take a mountain off my back. And so I want to encourage those of you out there who are listening or joining in, who might be in similar situation. Go get the help. Don't miss your court sessions, and sit with your counselors or whomever is giving you legal advice and map out that plan so you go and fight for your rights. I did just that, and today I'm a PhD candidate and I'm a full-time professor here. Don't let deportation stop you from living your American dream. And thank you so much for tuning in. Over to you, Diani.
So I want to say thank you to all my panel members of the panel. I also want to thank the Ride Along team. I want to thank everyone who's watching. If you know somebody who is going through removal proceedings, they should be talking to an attorney. My immigration journey was seamless. My mother came in, she petitioned for me, I came in on a green card. But I cannot imagine living in this country undocumented. I would encourage every single individual today to watch Immigration Nation, whether you're Republican or whether you're a Democrat. I too cried when I watched Immigration Nation, because I came into this country with my daughter. She was 4. I cannot imagine having to walk across the desert trying to get to the US-Mexico border and to be treated less than. So whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, I want us to put politics aside and treat each other as human beings. To my wonderful panelists, thank you. And to the Ride Along team, thank you so much. And remember, my friends, walk good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.